Big Saturday of SEC football on CBS. We got the A&M Bama rematch after the Aggies stunned the Tide last season as a 3-score underdog. They were 18.5-point underdogs. Zach Calzada and the Aggies were able to outscore Bama in that game and win it on a last-second field goal. It was one of the moments of the season in college football. This year might be a little bit of a different story. Bryce Young coming off that shoulder injury last week. Jalen Milroe took over, accounted for over 150 yards from scrimmage and a couple of touchdowns. Nick Saban asked a little bit earlier in the week about his quarterback situation going into this year's game.
I don't talk to Jimbo on a regular basis, but I'll call him and tell him right after the conference if you want me to. I mean, you guys think I'm going to tell you what we're going to do with our offense and our team? You might as well make it up. I saw today where there's headlines in the paper that, I'm going to keep it a secret what we're going to do with Bryce. It sounded like me making that statement, but I've never said that. But it was there in black and white. So you can make up whatever you want to make up. Look at somebody else's running quarterback and say they should put these plays in. I think that'd be a better way to do it.
Always interesting when we hear from Nick Saban, whether it's at halftime, after a game, or during the week. Brad Nessler knows that just about better than anybody, maybe except Jenny Dell. Brad, you're kind of like Jimbo in that you're preparing for this game, and you want to know which quarterback is going to play in this game as well. I know you haven't had a chance to talk to Nick Saban yet this week, but what are you expecting?
Well, Chris, I think the fact that at least he's at practice, earlier this week and is doing some things, as Nick would say. Nick didn't call me either. I thought he was going to call me and let me know, and it would have made my job a lot easier this week. But I'm preparing for both guys, and I'm preparing for at least two guys for Texas A&M. So that's kind of the way I look at it. We hope that Bryce Young can play. You don't want the Heisman Trophy winner to be hurt. It's not good for the game. And Jalen Milroe did a great job. I think it's a completely different offense when he's out there, obviously. And Bill O'Brien's going to call plays differently depending on who's out there. But, Milroe did a great job. But I think if Alabama had their druthers, they want number 9 out there playing quarterback.
No question about it. Still a heavy favorite, even though there is uncertainty at the quarterback position if it is Milroe. And we saw what he can do with his legs in that game against Arkansas. How much different does this game become if it's Milroe instead of Bryce Young?
Well, if I'm Bill O'Brien, I want to get him some easy throws, probably to guys out of the backfield. You saw a couple nice throws there, one to Isaiah Bond and one to Kobe Prentice. But, he's not as dynamic. Obviously, there's not many guys in college football that are as dynamic and can do the kind of things that Bryce Young can do. So that makes Jalen Milroe not a bad quarterback. He's just a backup quarterback, and he's done a nice job, 59-60% of his tosses, including last year and some mop-up duty. We saw what he did with the 77-yard run. I just think that if he's the guy and he's going to be the guy throughout the whole game, we're going to see a gigantic dose of Jahmyr Gibbs. That's what I would expect, not only on the ground, but swing passes, screen passes, that type of thing, just to get him in space and get Jalen Milroe comfortable throwing the football. It's not that he can't throw, but let's face it, he's not Bryce Young.
Alabama, it seems like it doesn't matter who's in there at quarterback, and I guess for A&M it's kind of the same thing, but in a much different way. They've really struggled offensively. They have major quarterback injury issues as well. What are you expecting at the quarterback position from the Aggies?
Well, I think if Max is ready to go, that he's going to be the guy. Haynes King just hasn't gotten it done. He had one good game last year. He had one good game at the beginning of this year. He's been turnover prone. He with the interceptions. Max had a little problem hanging out of the football as far as fumbles. So I think Max Johnson would be the guy if his thumbs are. Now, when going back to last year and talking to Jimbo Fisher when we were getting ready to do this game, talked about, Max Johnson had not yet transferred, hit the transfer portal. But Haynes King was going to be his guy when he got healthy. And then he talked a lot about Connor Wigman, the highly touted freshman, hasn't taken a snap yet. So they got quarterback issues. They got two guys and they can't figure out which one they want to play, whether they're injured or not, because both of them have made enough mistakes that it's been a problem for him. But I think, just overall, as far as winning ball games, that it'd be Max Johnson if his thumb's ready to go.
It's going to be extra spicy this week, not only because of the quarterback situation, but because people are going to keep asking him about Jimbo and what happened in the offseason. How much are you planning for the broadcast to delve into that, given that it's kind of died down and they kind of addressed it before the season as well?
It's going to be interesting. I haven't really talked to Craig Silver, our producer, too much about if it's going to be near the top of the broadcast or we're going to bury the headline. It would have been the headline if all the quarterbacks were healthy. I think we could go back and really make something out of it. And obviously, when we put this in prime time, we were kind of expecting 5-0 against 5-0. Let's be honest. If I'm Dan Weinberg and I'm programming the football games, and you want that one in prime time. So it's not quite what we had hoped for. But I think there's still some of that sting there. And you could see it in the clip you showed earlier of Nick when he was talking about the quarterbacks. Well, I'm not going to call Jimbo, or you want me to call Jimbo? And, Jimbo turns around and says, well, you want me to call Nick and tell him if Max Johnson's healthy or if it's going to be Haynes King? So they're kind of spitting at each other out of the side of their mouths a little bit still this week. So I don't think it's going to be a love fest when we see them meet at midfield, an hour before the game. We'll have the handshake. We'll see how cold it is or how salty it is, but I don't think they're the bosom buddies everybody thought they used to be.
Alabama, the last few years, they've been doing it by outscoring teams with one of the best, if not the best, offenses in the country. The defense has given up points. This season, defense only given up 11 points per game. And that number, I'm sure, is going to rise as the competition rises as well. But is this the best Alabama defense you've seen in your time covering the SEC Game of the Week here at CBS?
I think most people think it's the best defense they've had since 12, and that one was unbelievable, just off the charts. They didn't give up hardly any points. 11 points a game, if they can keep that pace, that's pretty good. But right now, they're pretty healthy. Brian Branch, I don't know what his situation is going to be, but they're in the top 10 in virtually everything. They've got their front four is solid right now. Byron Young is back, he's healthy. DJ Dale is, Tim Smith, of course, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Henry To'o, all those guys are healthy. And the secondary, as you see Will Anderson going down the field on a 25-yard interception return for a touchdown. That's probably the only drawback right now. They're not causing a lot of turnovers. They've only got one interception, and usually this time of year with the secondaries that Alabama has and the pressure they put on quarterbacks, they usually have more than one interception, especially from an outside linebacker, edge rusher. So that's one of the spots I think they probably want to improve on, and they probably will as they go.
We have seen heavy favorites have some real issues this season. Alabama almost lost at Texas. Georgia had to come from behind late at Missouri last week. In this specific game last year, Texas A&M winning as an 18.5-point underdog. Is there a scenario in your mind where you see Texas A&M having a chance in the fourth quarter to steal this one?
If they have Nick Calzado come back from Auburn and Nia Smith comes back from a broken leg, they got a really good chance. There's always that chance. I mean, I didn't think so last year. And, they had the game of the season, and Nick Calzado had a game of his life. I think Devon A-Chain has got to be huge. And when I'm talking about huge, I'm talking about 300 yards of total offense, 100 and something on the ground, 70 passes and run a kickback like he did last year for a touchdown. He's got to be their offense. Moose Muhammad has got to pick up some of the slack that Nia Smith out at the wide receiver spot. So it's going to be tough, and they're going to have great quarterback play and not. I know that's a lot of coach speak, but they add all that stuff together, they got a shot, but they're not playing at home either.
Well, it's going to be fun regardless. A lot of storylines from the coaches to the quarterbacks, and Brad Nessler are going to be covering it for us and calling the game on CBS in prime time on Saturday night. Brad, best of luck. Safe travels down there.
I'll just make sure that Nick doesn't get a hold of me, Chris. Thanks.
And if he does, just don't let us know what he tells you, right? Because
you got it.
Jimbo will be listening. Here we go. A&M, Alabama, 8 Eastern. Before that, it's number 2 Georgia hosting Auburn. So we have the top 2 teams in the country going back-to-back on CBS. HQ presented by Capital One. We've got an SEC doubleheader on Saturday night. CBS, the top 2 teams of the country, both heavy favorites at home. Georgia minus 30 against Auburn. Bama minus 24 against an A&M team that beat them a season ago. Get some picks with Barrett, Sallee, and Chip Patterson. Before we get to picks, want to start by addressing a few of the players here. Barrett, who are you most excited to see in that first game, Georgia and Auburn?
I'm excited to see Stetson Bennett because when you see what he's done the last couple of weeks, he has not gotten the protection that he has needed to at least make those games interesting in the first half. Like, look, I think Stetson Bennett's a great quarterback, but he is not finding receivers outside, but he can run. And when you look at this Auburn defense, it is gassed. It is tired. It is not capable of carrying the load the way that it needs to, considering how bad its offense is. So I want to see Stetson do things like this: scramble, find his receivers, figure out which of these receivers outside is going to be his go-to guy, because it can't just be Brock Bowers. So I think for me, this is a perfect opportunity for Stetson Bennett to get right. I think he can be extremely electric through the air and on the ground. And I think you're going to see that Georgia team open it up this week, especially after what we've seen the last couple of weeks with the Bulldogs.
My most exciting player is Bennett's best passing option. I'm talking about tight end Brock Bowers. I'm talking about one of the best tight ends in the entire country. And this is a passing game that has kind of taken a step back. We look at the season averages, and Stetson Bennett is one of two players in the SEC averaging more than 300 yards per game. They've got a top 3 passing offense in the conference, but 0 touchdown passes in either of the last 2 games, the Kent State victory and then the upset scare against Missouri. I think that this is going to be a spot where in the red zone, we want to get back to getting these touchdowns, and big number 19 is a huge part of that. I know that Kirby Smart is looking at the health of the wide receivers. He wants to get some wide receivers back before we start to see this Georgia offense really take off. But ultimately, I think that it is right there with number 19 that you are going to have the most excitement going up against this Auburn defense. When plays break down, when Stetson Bennett is scrambling, like Barrett was just talking about, his eyes will be looking for number 19. I think we get a big, big performance in the Deep South's oldest rivalry from Brock Bowers.
Yeah, people expecting a much better performance from Georgia in this game than the last couple of weeks against Kent State and then Missouri. The line is 30, Barrett. Are you willing to give that many points to Auburn?
No, I'm not. I'm taking Georgia, and I'm going to lay those. Auburn is a broken football team right now. Yeah, sure. Robbie Ashford played well through the air for the first half, but they cannot score in the second half. Brian Harsin on script, good. Brian Harsin off script, absolutely horrible. They're averaging under 3 points in the second half over their last 8 Power 5 games. That is absolutely inexcusable. So with a team like Georgia, we know what they're capable of. The talent level is up here. So, okay, maybe Auburn does hang around for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't make adjustments. Georgia does, and it is going to get completely sideways in the second half. Georgia, look, lay the 30, not going to be an issue.
I'm going to go with the total here. I feel so confident that of all the things that I can count on, it's Georgia's defense, which has been overlooked, under-discussed, not thought of, not given the praise it deserves. Because, I mean, the Bulldogs may have lost all those NFL draft picks, and they may be, on a talent player-by-player, position-by-position basis, not historically great. But you know what they are still? One of the best units in the whole daggum country, still only allowing 10.8 points per game. They've only given up 4 touchdowns all season. Auburn ain't scoring touchdowns in this game. And so I look at this and I think that this is too many points on the total. I could see Georgia comfortably cruising to something like a 38-3 kind of win. So I'll go under.
Okay, let's go to the nightcap, and it's a rematch of last year's really exciting matchup between Alabama and A&M. We're not talking about it this week as much as we thought we would be because A&M is just not as good as we thought they would be. They're 24-point underdogs in this game. Before we get to the picks, Barrett, how about a player to watch? And it's a little difficult right now because we don't know who's going to be playing at quarterback.
Yeah, and because of that, I'm taking the guy that was sort of the safety net last week in the second half after that game against Arkansas got close, and that's the running back Jahmyr Gibbs. He broke off 2 70-yard runs in the fourth quarter. He was the closer. We always talk about teams, if they're in a close game, who's going to be the one that shuts the door? It was Jahmyr Gibbs last week. So, yeah, Bryce Young's practicing. We'll see if he can go. Jalen Milroe is a running quarterback. I don't think they're going to make him throw all that much, especially if this game gets sideways, because this is going going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs show. I think this guy has been sort of waiting his turn. He's been the focal point of the offense throughout the course of the season, but you really saw him break out against Arkansas. So whether Bryce Young plays, I think we know he's probably not going to be 100%. If he doesn't, you're going to rely on Jahmyr Gibbs even more. So let's take a look at the Georgia Tech transfer. He is going to be the focal point of an offense that I think is going to want to lay a whipping on Texas A&M.
I'm going to stick with Alabama, but I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball. And I think that is a theme throughout our SEC on CBS doubleheader is that, for all that we talk about Stetson Bennett, for all that we talk about Bryce Young and both of these offenses, we have two of the country's, not just the SEC's, two of the country's best defenses on display in Georgia and Alabama. And so I want to focus in on Will Anderson. Look, he is not having the kind of pace that we had last season when Will Anderson was the best defensive player in the entire country, just rolling up sack after sack, tackle for loss after tackle for loss. But I think that Will Anderson's going to have himself a chance to absolutely feast on this Texas A&M offense that consistently gets behind the chains, consistently finds itself in third and long situations, and that is a green light go for number 31. I think this is going to be a spot where he's not going to be able to make up the gap on trying to get another historic pace in terms of his sack total, but I think that it's going to be very exciting to keep your eyes peeled on number 31 in a lot of very obvious passing situations. That's why Will Anderson's my most exciting player to watch in the game.
All right, well, the early game, the line is 30, and Barrett, you were fine laying that number in the Georgia game. It's 24 in this one. You comfortable with that?
Absolutely. I don't know if you guys remember back in 2014, Kenny Hill came out firing as the replacement for Johnny Manziel in week 1 against South Carolina. By early October, he was getting whipped 59-0 in Tuscaloosa. This game is going to be the biggest blowout since that game. Texas A&M's offense, it just doesn't do anything. It is literally Devin Achane, and that's it. Alabama knows that. They're going to key in on Devin Achane. They're going to absolutely stymie this offense. Texas A&M's not going to get to double digits. And we all can talk about the Jimbo and Saban thing. And look, I get it. I just think from an offensive execution standpoint, they're still sort of trying to figure out their identity. So I think that Nick will keep his foot on the gas for a very long time, not necessarily to rub it in Jimbo's face, although I'm sure he's going to take pleasure in that a little bit, but also try to figure out what his offensive identity is. So yeah, absolutely lay the points.
Line too little. But I'm not talking about the point spread like Barrett is. I'm talking about the total. Our implied score right here with the point spread and the total is 38-14. That doesn't seem right. I think Alabama is definitely going to be able to get over 40 in this game. I think that Texas A&M's defense, while talented, has really only flexed its muscles against poor offenses. Definitely not ones that are the caliber of the Crimson Tide. And I will give some respect to a coaching staff that somehow was able to get Zach Calzada to move the ball on Alabama all throughout last season's win. So 38-14 is the implied here. I think I could see Texas A&M finishing maybe just north of there, around 17. I think that Alabama, without a doubt, is going to be over 40. I will take Barrett's 59-0 because that is also a winner. But I just think this is a few too few points for me to be able to take the under. So I'm going over 51.5.
I hope you guys are wrong because I hope we get at least one interesting matchup. I guess you can always make it interesting with this, right? But I want to make it interesting with the eyeballs as well. Numbers say it's not going to be interesting. Guys, thank you so much. Barrett, Sallee, Chip Patterson. You can hear him on the Cover 3 podcast. Doubleheader is beginning at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. Georgia, 30-point favorites against Auburn. Barrett said lay the 30. Chip said under 49.5. Chip's going over the 51.5 in the nightcap. And Barrett said he'd lay pretty much any number with Alabama. It's going to be the biggest blowout in many a year.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.